I've been a fan of the Atelier series for a long time. Atelier games are my most anticipated every year, and Yumia has been no exception. However, I wasn't awaiting Yumia with just excitement. I've also had a bit of a sense of unease about the game leading up to it, and I've heard a lot of similar sentiments from other longtime fans as well. There's a lot to talk about regarding Yumia, and I hope I can clear up some concerns that people may have regarding synthesis and combat especially. And I really do think that a lot of people are going to enjoy this game, especially people new to the Atelier series as a whole. I also enjoyed my time with the game well enough. I had fun playing it, but there was a lot of disappointment for me personally around the game as well. I think Yumia is a pretty decent RPG overall, but for me, Yumia is just not a good Atelier game. And before we really get into the review proper, just let me add a warning. This review is going to get pretty negative at times. I don't want to sour anyone's enjoyment on the game, so if you're hyped up for it and really looking forward to this, I won't blame you if you just close the video now and come back later after you've played it. I have a lot of opinions on mechanics and stuff. I really care about the depth and complexity of the systems that the Atelier series is known for, and a lot of that just kind of isn't there in Yumia. I first got into the Atelier series because of Shimotsuki Haruka and her lovely singing voice. She has a lot of wonderful songs in some of the older Atelier games, and while she doesn't sing for Yumia, that's not anything I would hold against the game, of course, but the reason I ended up staying with the series is because of its engaging and deep systems, both crafting and combat alike, and that's something which Atelier has managed to consistently deliver on over its many iterations year upon year. And in that regard, I personally think Yumia falls quite short. Atelier producer Junzo Hosoi is on record saying that with Yumia, they want to bring Atelier to a more global audience and make an Atelier experience that everyone can enjoy. And a large part of realizing that vision is apparently making the games easier to understand, because new players would often get confused at the complex mechanics and interactions in synthesis. So they sort of took a deep look at the synthesis system and tried to distill it into a form that's still Atelier, but simpler to interact with and more robust. And I think while they succeeded on making a system that's simple, they sort of forgot to add or preserve the depth that Atelier is known for in its crafting, right? So it kind of leads to a final product that's rather bland and not that interesting to dive into. While I think this sort of crafting system may appeal more widely on a surface level to people just trying to play a fun RNG and not get too deep into mechanics, it's not really something I can see that many people like falling in love with, right? The best way I can sort of illustrate the lack of depth in the synthesis is this. In the endgame, I started using the auto-synthesis function for nearly everything. And the reason for this wasn't because I didn't know how the system worked or because I was lazy. It's because the autosynth was not only 10 times faster than anything I could do manually, it created an optimal product every single time. When the autosynth is making an optimal result, when you no longer need player input to get to the best items, I think you can kind of see why the synthesis might be a little too simple and why that might lead to it being kind of dull, right? So even if I were to synthesize a lot of the items manually, there was no room for improvement. Autosynth was already doing everything to the best you can make it. For equipment, sometimes you can maybe get like a slightly better result by doing it manually. For equipment, you need to stack stats, which there's a little bit of optimization there. For everything else, where the input materials don't actually matter that much for the final outcome, it's just effects and quality, then Autosynth does everything perfectly, as long as you just have a large stack of rainbow penny balls in your container. And what's the reason behind this? Well, to me, what I feel is the big reason behind why Yumia synthesis is like this is because it really does everything to de-emphasize the importance of specific materials. Almost every slot for a material in synthesis is type agnostic. You don't need to think about categories, you don't need to think about elements, you can throw any item inside of there. So what ends up happening is you just sort your container by the most resonance and throw the material in. There are some effects that kind of try to differentiate materials a little bit, but they often aren't impactful enough to make a real difference over just picking something with a larger base resonance. So it just creates this awkward situation where the only material that matters in the game is your best one. And in pretty much every situation, that is Rainbow Penny Ball. On top of that, there is the ability to duplicate materials in the game. So once you get a good material, you will duplicate it to, 999 and never have to worry about farming materials again. If you have the best material, there's no reason to go for anything else. So it kind of makes gathering a little pointless eventually, and it just causes every synthesis to be the same. Basically, to put it simply, Yumia's alchemy system is one that's easily brute force with a one-size-fits-all solution. And to me, this means the system is just too simple, it's pretty boring, and while it might sound harsh, I don't really have a single positive thing to say about synthesis in Yumia. I can only hope it's scrapped in the future. The ideas here are not compelling to me. So the synthesis was a bust, but what about the combat? Yumia is Gut's fourth attempt at a more action-oriented combat system for the Atelier series, and this time around, they've left the ATB style from Ryza behind and gone for something completely real-time. Honestly, this is fine with me, as I don't really care whether combat is turn-based or action-based, I just want it to be fun. And I think overall Yumia doesn't quite get there. For the first few hours of gameplay while you're learning the system, dodging enemy attacks feels good, the perfect dodge is quite satisfying, and the first boss can be super tough on harder difficulties if you don't time your dodges correctly, and also if you didn't go out of your way to make OP gear. But that's all the combat system really has to offer. The perfect dodge is too powerful, which means combat revolves entirely around it. You listen for the sound, you press dodge, and then you mash some buttons, repeat forever. It's pretty one-dimensional. I'm not a huge fan of the perfect dodge, at least in its current form, and I'd like to see it nerfed significantly. It shouldn't be able to dodge even the red AoE zones, in my opinion. If you're forced to move out of those, that would at least alleviate some of the issues and lead to the combat feeling at least a little bit more dynamic. I also think it would be nice if skills were designed in a way to reward more thoughtful button pressing, make you think about rotations, as right now, mashing is pretty much good enough. It's all you really have to do. Yumia also has a problem that I had with Ryza 3 as well, where the balance of the game is just completely out of whack. It is way too easy to get overpowered and broken items early on in progression. You can make items strong enough to basically one-shot the first boss even on the hardest difficulty. You might say, but Atelier has never been balanced or hard, and as someone who spends hundreds of hours playing every Atelier game on the hardest difficulty, I disagree with that quite a bit. Many other games in the series have been quite balanced and quite difficult on the harder difficulties during early and mid-story progression, and Yumia doesn't have to be different. So yeah, Yumia's combat system ends up just feeling very straightforward, one-dimensional, and flat to me with not much nuance. Perfect dodging is satisfying for a while, but the luster quickly wears off and it becomes just kind of boring. The last things I have to talk about are the exploration and the story. While the exploration is definitely the high point of the game in my opinion, that doesn't mean it's without its flaws. Yumia's movement feels very good. The triple jump is super satisfying, especially when you can use it to get to areas that you didn't even think possible, and you can't go more than a few feet without discovering a new point of interest. There are so many things scattered around the map. The maps are very large and generally interesting with a lot of verticality. However, much like the rest of the game, the excitement quickly fades as you get past the first area and into the second and third and fourth, and realize that everything is the same. All of the points of interest are copy-pasted from one area to the next, with nothing new ever showing up over the course of the game, just the same things to discover over and over again, with a different color palette in the background. A Shrine of Prayer might be fun to solve the first few times, but by the 50th time you're just pretty tired of it. This leads to Yumia's world feeling more like a checklist than a place to really explore. Some people may enjoy this type of gameplay, but it's not my preferred type of open world. And as for the story, I mainly play Atelier games for the gameplay. Whether the story was good or bad doesn't actually have much weight in my overall opinion, but I'll at least talk about it a little bit. I'm not a writing critic, my opinion won't have much nuance. Overall, I thought the themes fell a bit flat, and the story was just okay. I did really like Nina's arc, I'm a sucker for that kind of thing, and I think her story is pretty nice. There is the occasional funny interaction between the cast, which always brighten things up, and I did generally enjoy the humor in the game. The story also felt very Atelier to me as well. If you're the type of person who plays Atelier for the story, I think Yumia will feel like a good Atelier game to you. Anyways, I suppose I could probably talk about the good and bad points of Yumia for hours on end, but I'll cut it here. Overall, I enjoyed my time with the game, and I can even recommend it as a game, but I still strongly feel that it is a low point for the series I've grown to love over the years, and I hope Gust doesn't continue down the path of simplifying the mechanics and removing all of the depth that we've grown accustomed to. If I had to rate the game, I'd probably put it at about a C+ or a B- on my tier list, which I posted a video of a few months ago. I will still be releasing guides over the next week, so look forward to that, and doing speedruns on my Twitch channel. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I hope you all enjoy the game more than I do. Thanks for watching.